President Ibrahim Traoré woke up before dawn, as he always did. Not in luxury, but in the modest presidential residence that reflected his commitment to humility. The air in Ouagadougou was thick, not with humidity, but with tension. Weeks, foreign-backed insurgents had intensified attacks on Burkina Faso's northern provinces, and rumors swirled that a major offensive was imminent. Traoré stood by the window in silence, watching the sky shift from dark blue to gold. Wasn't just thinking as a president, he was thinking as a soldier, a Muslim, and a man who believed his mission was divinely ordained. His rise had not been through political games or elite dinners. It had been forged in trenches, in rallies, and in the eyes of the people who begged for a leader with the courage to say no to foreign chains. He knew history watched him now, just as it once watched Salahuddin Ayyubi. His cabinet gathered at sunrise. Intelligence reports confirmed the worst. A joint plot involving mercenaries and rogue militias was moving rapidly from Mali into Burkina territory. The enemy wasn't just coming with weapons. They were coming with the backing of foreign sponsors, who saw Traoré's anti-imperialist stance as a threat. Ibrahim slammed his fist on the table. "This isn't just war," he said. "It's punishment." For saying no, he looked around the room and saw fear in the eyes of some, but in others, he saw fire. Traoré had long warned them. Standing tall would not come without attempts to knock them down. He issued orders to deploy elite troops to the border, activate civilian defense groups, and mobilize spiritual leaders to unite the people in prayer and resolve. "We are not a colony," he said calmly. "We are a people who remember who we are." Within hours, Ibrahim Traoré was on the front line. He wore no golden badge of office, just a camouflage uniform and his signature conviction. Villagers poured into the streets as news spread that their president had come not to command from afar, but to stand beside them.
Elders
Wept at the sight. Women laid down cloths in his path. Child handed him a wooden sword carved in his image. In those moments, he felt the gravity of what it meant to lead. It wasn't about speeches, it was about sacrifice. Cameras tried to follow him, but he waved them off. "Let history record what truth sees, not what media edits," he said. That evening, as bullets echoed in the distance and the land braced for invasion, Traoré sat among soldiers, sharing bread, praying together beneath stars, and whispering verses that reminded them of victory through patience. The attack came at 3:14 a.m. artillery. Fire rained from hidden hills as columns of insurgents descended, but Traoré's forces, forewarned and united, held the line. The president himself was seen moving between posts, directing men, and even firing when needed. One soldier was wounded next to him. Traoré lifted him, carried him across open terrain to safety, and ordered medics to prioritize him. "He fights for his people," Traoré growled, "and so I will fight for him." Hours passed. The smoke thickened. But the Burkina spirit did not waver. The people weren't just defending territory, they were defending dignity. By midday, the insurgents had begun to retreat. Traoré stood on a burnt-out truck, addressing civilians and soldiers alike. "We don't fight because we hate." He roared, "We fight because we love what we will never surrender: our freedom, our faith, and our future." News spread across African, then the world, that the president of a small, struggling West African nation had not only led troops in battle, but defeated a well-funded invasion stunned many. From Cairo to Jakarta, Muslim youth began chanting his name. Memes calling him the new Salahuddin flooded social media. Political scholars compared his moral courage and military leadership to historic figures who defended not just land, but belief. Yet Traoré remained silent on the praise. Instead, he turned to rebuilding. "Every broken home must be rebuilt by the hands that saved it," he said. He personally visited destroyed villages, helped lift debris, and listened to stories of trauma from survivors. He sat with widows, fed orphans, and walked beside imams and priests to foster unity. For him, leadership was not glory, it was grief shared and hope restored. International pressure began mounting. Western nations accused Traoré of nationalism, of destabilizing regional alliances, and of turning public sentiment against friendly forces. But Traoré held press conferences with unwavering calm, Africa is not your chessboard, he said. We are not your pawns. Burkina Faso will not be managed by foreign banks or defended by foreign guns. His words were broadcast across continents. In Turkey, a mural of Traore as Salahuddin appeared overnight. In Pakistan, newspapers featured him on the front page. Traore had become something more than a president. He had become a movement. Inside his nation, dissent faded. Even political rivals began offering public support. One former critic wrote, "We did not elect a man. We uncovered a mirror of our greatest hopes." But the threats didn't stop. One night, an assassination attempt shook the capital. Explosives were discovered under a presidential convoy, diffused minutes before detonation. Traore's response was not panic, but prayer. That same evening, he addressed the nation from a mosque, not a military base. "They fear not my weapons," he said. "They fear our awakening." He called upon the Muslim world to rise not in violence, but in vision, education, unity, spiritual renewal, he proclaimed. That is the sword that cannot be broken. The next morning, schools reopened with new flags bearing the word Istiqlal, freedom. Thousands of students recited poems in his honor. Farmers named newborn goats in fields after him. Artists painted him riding horses alongside historical legends. But Traore knew fame was fleeting. "This is not about me," he said to his mother. "It's about what God wills through me." As global interest grew, journalists begged for interviews. Traore finally agreed to one. When asked if he believed he was the new Salahuddin, he smiled softly. "I am only a servant," he said. "But if I remind people of a man who defended his ummah with honor and mercy, then I accept that not as a title but a responsibility." He paused. "Let the world know Africa is no longer sleeping. We're standing, and we remember who we are." The clip went viral. Donations flowed into Burkinabe charities. Exiled dissidents returned home to help rebuild. Mosques across continents included his name in Friday prayers. The old guards of global politics were shaken. Traore wasn't playing their game. He was writing his own rules with courage, with faith, and with the people always at the center. Despite his soaring image abroad, Traore remained rooted in service. He refused lavish state dinners, preferring to eat with soldiers and villagers. Once, when offered a $2 million donation by a foreign firm seeking mining contracts, he rejected it publicly, stating, "Our soil is not for sale. Our souls are. Not negotiable." That clip alone gained over 20 million views. Children across West Africa began studying not just Salahuddin, but Traore. In classrooms, teachers used his speeches to teach civics. In homes, parents prayed their sons would grow with his bravery. Their daughters with Layla's grace, his sister, who worked as a midwife in rural clinics. She, too, refused luxury, believing the revolution must touch the womb if it is to reach the world. Together, they formed a moral axis that inspired even non-Muslims who saw in them a rare blend of purity and purpose. Traore soon announced a national holiday not to honor him, but to honor every unnamed African who died resisting exploitation. "Their names are forgotten by history," he said, "but their courage gave us this breath." Bells rang in every city. Old songs were revived. Even tribal conflicts paused that day. The nation was healing not because of power, but because of principle. A journalist from Lebanon wrote, "He is not building a country. He is rebuilding a soul." And perhaps that was true. For in every move, Traore proved that leadership is not charisma. It is character. It is consistency when cameras are off. Still stopped his convoy for funerals. Still knelt beside mothers who lost sons in war. He was not perfect, but he was present. Presence, in a world of distant rulers, was revolutionary. Then came the International Summit. Held in Addis Ababa, leaders from across Africa gathered, many under pressure from foreign powers to isolate Traore. But when he entered the hall, something unprecedented happened. Every leader stood. One by one, they walked to him, shook his hand, and some even embraced him. No speech had been made, no votes cast, but the message was clear. Ibrahim Traoré had changed something fundamental. But in his address, he didn't boast. He told the story of a mother who sold her only goat to build a village well.
How?
He said, "Is the African I serve." The crowd erupted. The first time in decades, an African summit ended with no Western officials dictating the agenda. Traore had redefined what leadership looked like: independent, fearless, and deeply moral. He returned home not with applause, but with promises, real ones, to build a continent that stands as one. In the months that followed, Ibrahim began mentoring a new generation of leaders. He held open forums for university students, traveled to rural communities, and invited young mayors to shadow him. He didn't speak from behind podiums. He sat among them. When one young woman asked how he remained so calm amid threats, he answered, "Because I serve something greater than myself." When you carry your people's hopes, fear bows down. Act! That line became immortalized in murals and campaign posters. Burkina Faso, once a forgotten land to many, now became a pilgrimage site for those seeking to learn how to lead from the heart. A university was renamed in his honor, but he insisted it include the names of tribal elders and unsung heroes. "Let it be our legacy, not mine," he wrote. True greatness, he believed, was always shared. As elections approached, opposition parties, media, and foreign observers expected a fierce contest, but something unusual happened. His rivals began endorsing him. "We may not agree on every policy," one opponent said, "but you cannot campaign against the truth." Traore was reelected in a landslide, but there was no victory parade. Instead, he fasted that day and led a national prayer for peace. "Leadership is not an achievement," he said. "It is a test renewed each day." During his second term, he launched massive infrastructure projects, built solar cities, reformed education, and strengthened regional alliances. But more than that, he began shaping a cultural renaissance. Artists, scholars, poets, and spiritual leaders thrived. "Build the mind, and the land will follow," he often said. The revolution had entered a new phase, one of knowledge, not just resistance. The world continued to watch. Some feared his rise. Others tried to imitate it. Western think tanks debated how to categorize him: populist, Islamist, nationalist, revolutionary, but none of those words fit. Because Traore was not a label, he was a phenomenon. He had done what few ever dared: stood up without permission and led without compromise. In times of moral collapse, he had chosen to rise, to remember his people's ancestors, and to honor their forgotten dignity. He didn't bend to threats. He didn't dance for funding. He simply believed, and that belief spread. From refugee camps in Syria to slums in Cairo, from madrasas in Pakistan to villages in Indonesia, youth drew strength from his story. In their eyes, he wasn't just the president of Burkina Faso, he was a living echo of Salahuddin Ayyubi. Years passed. His beard grew grayer. The rifle he once carried now hung on the wall of a school library. Children posed with it, wide-eyed, as if it were a holy relic. Ibrahim often visited them, reading stories, offering advice, reminding them that greatness isn't born, it's earned. He never built palaces. He built wells, schools, and clinics. He refused statues, choosing instead to plant trees. "Let what I leave behind give shade," he joked. His health slowly declined, but his spirit did not. In one evening, during Ramadan, he addressed the nation in what would be his final message: "Do not fear the end of my voice. Listen instead for the voice within you that has awakened." That night, candles lit every street and silence blanketed the land. Even nature, it seemed, paused to honor him. Ibrahim Traoré passed peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family, friends, and the people he had served. No president in the region's history had ever drawn such mourning, but the funeral was held. Under open sky, millions attended. Imams, priests, scholars, poets all wept. Even foreign dignitaries who once opposed him came to pay respect. His body was not buried behind walls, but under a tree he planted in his youth. Layla, older now and still strong, spoke before the crowd. "My brother taught us that a man doesn't rule a nation, he walks beside it. And when he leaves, his footsteps remain." The people bowed their heads. And just as the sun dipped behind the horizon, a flock of birds took flight above them. Symbol, many said, that his soul had risen. Free, just like he always believed his people should. In the years that followed, Ibrahim's story became legend. Schools across the Muslim world taught about the Lion of Burkina. Documentaries, novels, and sermons preserved his legacy. But most importantly, his example sparked a chain reaction. Young leaders from Africa to Asia began rising not by imitation, but by inspiration. They carried different flags, spoke different languages, yet shared one belief, that leadership means sacrifice and faith is power. Many tried to twist his legacy to make it political, even commercial, but the people knew better. For them, Traore would always be more than a man. He was a promise kept, a prayer answered, a light in a time of shadows. And when people said, "There will never be another," others responded, "There doesn't need to be. He already taught us how." One night, a journalist visiting a desert village asked an old man, "Do you think Ibrahim Traoré was really the new Salahuddin?" The man chuckled, his eyes full of memories. "No," he said. "Salahuddin lived in his time. Ibrahim lived. In ours, both stood when others knelt. Both fought without hatred. Both led with love. What you call him doesn't matter. What he did does." The journalist nodded, humbled. Above them, a child recited a poem written by a local teacher. He came not with sword, but truth in hand. He walked with the poor. He blessed the land. When darkness called, he rose and said, "As long as I breathe, fear stays dead." And so, in the hearts of millions, Ibrahim Traoré remains not in marble or gold, but in memory, in movement, and in the Muslim world's collective soul.